My name is Kitty Williams, and at 67 years old, I never thought I would experience being locked in a dark closet by my own son-in-law, Derek. The worst part was hearing my daughter Amanda walking by, pretending not to hear my cries for help. As I sat there in complete darkness, feeling my heart race with fear, I remembered something they had no idea about. This mansion they lived in, the one they made me feel unwelcome in, was actually mine. If you've ever felt underestimated because of your age, drop a comment below and subscribe to hear how I turned the tables on my manipulative son-in-law and taught him a lesson he'll never forget. Life has a funny way of teaching us lessons, especially about the people we love the most. After my husband Thomas died 20 years ago, it was just Amanda and me against the world. I poured everything I had into making sure she had the best opportunities in life. As a school teacher, my salary wasn't impressive, but I worked extra tutoring jobs and summer school to save enough for her college fund. When Amanda got accepted to Princeton with a partial scholarship, I couldn't have been prouder. We hugged and cried in our tiny kitchen, the acceptance letter clutched in her trembling hands. Those were the days when her eyes would light up whenever I walked into a room, when our bond seemed unbreakable. Medical school was even more challenging financially, but I never let Amanda worry about money. I sold my vintage jewelry collection pieces that had been in my family for generations to help cover her expenses. I told her they were just gathering dust anyway. What I didn't tell her was how I would visit the jewelry store window, sometimes looking at similar pieces and remembering my mother's hands as she showed me how to clasp a necklace. During Amanda's residency, I would drive 3 hours each way every Sunday to bring her home-cooked meals for the week. She was so focused on becoming a cardiologist, often forgetting to eat or sleep. I remember how thin she looked during those years, how the dark circles under her eyes made my heart ache. But we were still a team, still sharing our dreams and fears over those Sunday dinners. Everything changed when Amanda met Derek Thompson at a hospital fundraiser 6 years ago. She was 31, established in her career, and Derek was 35. A charming real estate developer with perfect teeth and Italian suits. The first time she brought him to dinner at my modest home, I noticed how his eyes scanned everything, assessing values, barely hiding his judgment of our middle-class surroundings. But Amanda was smitten. For the first time, I saw my practical, level-headed daughter making impulsive decisions. 3 months after meeting Derek, she called me at midnight. I can still hear the breathless excitement in her voice. I got engaged. Derek proposed at Le Bernardin with a 3-carat diamond. Mom, I've never been so happy. The wedding planning was a whirlwind, with Derek insisting on an exclusive venue that cost more than my entire retirement savings. When I gently suggested something more modest, Amanda looked at me with new eyes, cool and distanced. Mom, Derek says we only get married once. Don't you want the best for me? Of course I did. So I smiled and nodded and watched as my daughter transformed into someone I barely recognized, someone who measured happiness in carats and square footage. After the lavish wedding, which my modest gift seemed embarrassingly small at, they began house hunting. When they found their dream mansion, a 6-bedroom Georgian-style home on 3 acres, Derek mentioned, they were just short on the down payment. Before Amanda could even ask, I offered to sell my home, the one I had lived in for 30 years, the one where I had raised her. I would come and live with them in their pool house until I found a smaller place, I suggested. The relief on my daughter's face should have been my first warning sign. The lack of protest of, "Are you sure?" Mom struck me as odd, but I pushed the thought away. This was my daughter, the person I loved most in the world. What Amanda and Derek didn't know was that Thomas had left me far more financially secure than I ever let on. My apparent middle-class lifestyle was a choice, not a necessity. Thomas had been incredibly successful with his investments and had a substantial life insurance policy. After his death, I chose to continue living modestly and working my teaching job because it gave me purpose. I kept my wealth a secret, partly because I never wanted Amanda to feel entitled rather than determined. I wanted her to build her own success. But as Derek entered our lives, another reason emerged. I wanted to see if he truly loved my daughter for herself, not for potential inheritance or financial gain. The sale of my home provided exactly the amount they needed for their down payment. As I moved my belongings into their guest house, I noticed Derek already speaking to me differently with a hint of condescension now that he believed I was financially dependent on them. Amanda's phone calls to me became less frequent. Our Sunday dinners dwindled to monthly courtesy visits. When I would visit their main house, Derek would make comments about me tracking in dirt or leaving fingerprints on their crystal glasses. Watching my daughter shrink under his subtle criticisms, always followed by, "But I love you anyway," made something in my chest tighten. The way she began to dress differently, speak differently, always with a nervous glance toward Derek for approval, set off alarm bells. I tried desperately to silence. After all, who was I to judge? Perhaps this was simply the natural distance that comes with marriage. Perhaps I was being the clingy mother I had always promised myself I wouldn't become. So I smiled and kept my thoughts to myself. I decorated my little guest house with my remaining belongings and pretended not to notice when weeks passed without Amanda visiting me despite living just 50 yards away. What they didn't know was that I was watching, waiting, and quietly making plans to protect both my daughter and myself. Because a mother's instinct is rarely wrong, and mine was screaming that something was very wrong with the charming Derek Thompson. Moving into the guest house on their property marked the beginning of a strange new chapter in my life. The structure itself was beautiful, a converted carriage house with exposed beams and modern amenities. But despite its physical charm, it soon began to feel like a gilded cage. Within the first month, Derek established a list of rules. I was not to use the main pool when they had guests over. I needed to give 24 hours notice before visiting the main house. Any visitors to the guest house needed to be approved by Derek first, for security purposes. My gardening was restricted to a small patch behind the carriage house, as my amateur efforts might affect the estate's landscaping aesthetic. I followed these rules carefully, not wanting to cause friction. But the restrictions multiplied like weeds after spring rain. When my best friend Judith came to visit without prior approval, Derek intercepted her at the main gate and questioned her for 20 minutes before allowing her through. Judith left early, uncomfortable with the atmosphere, and didn't return. My Tuesday night book club became an issue when Derek complained about the 3 or 4 cars parked on the circular driveway once a month. Even though we finished by 9 p.m. and were a group of retired teachers in our 60s and 70s, he claimed it presented a security risk. Rather than argue, I moved our meetings to the local library. Throughout all this, Amanda grew increasingly distant. When we did speak, she parroted Derek's concerns. "Mom, Derek works so hard to provide this beautiful home. The least we can do is respect his need for privacy and order." I noticed other troubling signs. Amanda, once confident and outspoken, now checked her phone constantly for messages from Derek. She changed outfits multiple times before dinner parties, anxious about his approval. The vibrant, independent woman I raised was fading before my eyes, replaced by someone whose primary concern was keeping her husband happy. One afternoon, while Amanda and Derek were at a charity gala, I went to the main house to borrow a book from their library. On Derek's desk, I noticed financial documents he had left out. I shouldn't have looked, but maternal instinct overrode propriety. What I saw alarmed me. Derek's development company was heavily leveraged, with several projects behind schedule and over budget. There were letters from investors expressing serious concerns. This discovery led me to do something I never anticipated. Using my hidden financial resources, I contacted a lawyer and quietly purchased the mortgage on their mansion through a shell company. If Derek's business failed, at least Amanda would not lose her home. I told myself it was protection, not interference. Life in the guest house grew lonelier. Derek began suggesting to neighbors and friends that I was becoming forgetful and confused. When I misplaced my glasses or forgot a name, he exchanged knowing looks with Amanda. I overheard him on the phone. "She's showing early signs of dementia. We're monitoring the situation." I was 67, not 97. My annual physical had shown me to be in excellent health, my mind as sharp as ever. But Derek's campaign was insidious, planting seeds of doubt even in Amanda's mind. She began checking the stove when she visited, asking if I'd taken my vitamins, speaking slightly louder, as if my hearing had suddenly deteriorated. Each interaction felt like an evaluation, rather than a visit from my daughter. Through it all, I maintained my dignity. I kept meticulous notes of Derek's schemes and manipulations. I recorded conversations when possible, documented the isolation tactics, and stayed in contact with my lawyer. I may have appeared to be a declining widow, but inside I was building a case. 6 months into this arrangement, Amanda announced she was pregnant. My joy at becoming a grandmother collided with my growing concern about the household this child would be raised in. Derek's response to the news was telling his first comment about how pregnancy would affect Amanda's figure, his second about the cost of quality childcare. That night alone in my guest house, I made a decision. I would not allow my grandchild to grow up watching their mother diminish under Derek's control. Nor would I permit Derek to eventually treat my grandchild with the same manipulation he used on everyone else. I began liquidating some investments, creating a trust for both Amanda and the unborn child that Derek could not access. I updated my will and established a relationship with a security company, Steps, that seemed excessive even to me at the time, but which I took as precautions. As Amanda's pregnancy progressed, Derek tightened his control. He monitored her diet, obsessively installed cameras throughout the main house for her safety, and gradually reduced her hospital hours, suggesting that working during pregnancy was selfish. I bit my tongue so hard I sometimes tasted blood watching my daughter's world shrink while her belly grew. The few times I attempted to speak with her privately, Derek would appear slipping an arm around her waist, asking if everything was okay, in a tone that made it clear only one answer was acceptable. The walls of my guest house, though physically distant from the main house, seemed to vibrate with the tension building across the property. Something would have to break eventually. I just didn't know then that the breaking point would involve a dark closet and a revelation that would change everything. The evening that truly shattered my heart began like many others, with one of Derek's elaborate dinner parties. He had invited potential investors for his newest development project, a luxury condominium complex that, based on the documents I'd seen, was already significantly underfunded. I wasn't invited to the dinner, of course. I rarely was these days. But from my guest house window, I could see the parade of expensive cars and well-dressed guests arriving at the main house. Amanda had visited briefly that morning, looking exhausted at 5 months pregnant, to let me know they'd be entertaining and to please keep my lights low to maintain the ambiance of their property. Around 8:30 that evening, I walked across the lawn to return a casserole dish to their kitchen. I planned to slip in through the service entrance, leave the dish, and return to my guest house unnoticed. As I approached, I heard Derek's voice coming through the partially open window of his study. "Look, the permits are a formality. We'll start construction next month regardless. The environmental survey is just red tape. I have someone handling it." I froze, the casserole dish clutched against my chest. What I was hearing was clearly illegal. Derek continued. "Once we get the first phase funded, we can divert some of that money to shore up the Highland project. The investors will never know." This wasn't just cutting corners. This was securities fraud. I stood there, heart pounding, as Derek laughed and assured whoever he was speaking with that everything was under control. I should have left immediately, pretended I'd heard nothing. But something in me snapped at the casual way he discussed defrauding people, perhaps the same way he'd discuss controlling his wife or dismissing his mother-in-law. I waited until his call ended, then knocked on the study door. When Derek opened it, surprise quickly turned to annoyance on his face. "Kitty, this is unexpected. The kitchen entrance is around back, as you know." I placed the casserole dish on his desk. "I overheard your conversation, Derek. What you're planning is illegal." His expression changed, hardening into something I'd never seen directed at me before. Something dangerous. "I think you're confused, Kitty. Perhaps you misheard. Your imagination has been quite active lately, hasn't it?" I stood my ground. "I'm not confused. You're planning to misuse investor funds and ignore environmental regulations. That's fraud." Derek closed the study door with a soft click. When he turned back to me, his voice was low, controlled. "This is exactly why Amanda and I have been concerned about your cognitive state. Hearing things, making accusations. Do you know how much stress this puts on Amanda during her pregnancy?" "I'm not imagining things, Derek. I heard you clearly." He stepped closer. Did you? And who do you think people will believe? A respected businessman or an aging mother-in-law with increasing memory issues? The threat was implicit but clear. I thought of the groundwork he'd been laying, the comments about my supposed forgetfulness, the concerned looks exchanged with Amanda. I'm going to talk to Amanda, I said, moving toward the door. Derek blocked my path. Amanda doesn't need this stress right now. She's finally creating a family of her own, one that doesn't revolve around her mother's needs. Those words stung more than I wanted to admit. I tried to step around him, but he moved with me. You know, Kitty, Amanda and I have been talking. With the baby coming, we're concerned about your living alone in the guest house. We've been looking into some very nice assisted living communities. I felt a chill run through me. I don't need assisted living. I'm perfectly capable of caring for myself. Are you? Derek's smile didn't reach his eyes. The neighbors have noticed you wandering the grounds at night. You left the gas stove on last week. Amanda is worried sick about you, but she's too kind to tell you how much of a burden your declining condition is becoming. None of that was true. I hadn't used the gas stove in weeks, preferring my electric kettle. And my evening walks were hardly wandering. Before I could respond, the study door opened, and Amanda stood there, her baby bump prominent under her black cocktail dress. Her eyes darted between us, sensing the tension. What's going on? Our guests are asking where you are, Derek. Derek's demeanor changed instantly, his voice softening. Your mother is having one of her episodes, honey. She thinks she overheard something about my business dealings and is making accusations. Amanda's face fell as she turned to me. Oh, Mom, not tonight, please. Amanda, I heard him planning to commit fraud. He's talking about diverting investor funds. My daughter sighed, a sound of exhaustion and disappointment that cut through me. Mom, Derek is one of the most respected developers in the region. This paranoia has to stop. I'm not paranoid. I know what I heard. Derek placed his arm around Amanda's shoulders. This is what the doctor warned us about, remember? The confabulation, the conspiracy theories I think we need to move up that appointment. What appointment? I asked, ice forming in my stomach. Amanda wouldn't meet my eyes. We've been consulting with a geriatric specialist, Mom. We're concerned about these episodes. I felt the floor shift beneath me. My own daughter believed I was losing my mind. Or worse, was pretending to believe it to support her husband. I need to get back to our guests, Amanda said, already turning away. Derek, handle this, please, discreetly. She left without another word to me, without even checking if I was okay. The daughter who once ran to me for every scraped knee and broken heart now couldn't be bothered to hear my side. Derek waited until her footsteps faded. Well, Kitty, I think it's time you return to your guest house. We'll discuss your living arrangements tomorrow. I'm not going anywhere, Derek. And I won't stay silent about what I heard. His expression darkened. I really wish you hadn't said that. 2 weeks later, on my 68th birthday, Amanda arranged a small dinner, just the three of us. I arrived at the main house hopeful that perhaps this marked a turning point, a chance to rebuild our relationship. The dinner itself was pleasant enough, though conversation remained superficial. After dessert, Amanda cleared her throat and reached for Derek's hand. Mom, we have something to discuss with you. My heart lifted. Perhaps an apology, an acknowledgement that Derek had gone too far with his accusations about my mental state. Instead, Amanda continued, we found a wonderful retirement community, River Pines. It has independent living apartments but also assisted care if needed. They have an opening next month. I stared at her, unable to process what I was hearing. You want to put me in a home? I'm completely independent. I don't need any assistance. Derek jumped in. It's not about need right now, Kitty. It's about planning for the future. River Pines has a waiting list usually, but I pulled some strings. We've already put down a deposit, Amanda added. You can visit next week. The betrayal was so complete, so unexpected despite all the warning signs, that I couldn't speak for several moments. My daughter, my only child, was trying to send me away based on lies and manipulation. When I found my voice, it was steady, despite the earthquake happening in my chest. I won't be going to River Pines or any other facility. I'm staying in the guest house as agreed when I sold my home to help you buy this place." Amanda's expression hardened in a way that reminded me painfully of Derek. "Mom, we're not asking. The guest house isn't suitable for someone in your condition. After the baby comes, we'll need that space for a nanny anyway." In that moment, I realized I had lost my daughter completely to Derek's influence. The young woman who had once shared all her dreams with me now saw me as nothing more than an inconvenience to be managed. I left the birthday dinner early, walking back to my guest house, under a sky littered with stars that seemed suddenly cold and distant. Inside, I called my lawyer and my financial advisor, setting into motion the plans I had been reluctant to execute. Sometimes a heart has to break completely before you can see clearly what needs to be done. That night, my heart shattered, but my resolve crystallized. I would not go quietly to River Pines. I would not abandon my daughter to a man who saw people as pawns. And I would not allow myself to be discarded after a lifetime of loving and sacrificing. The game had changed, and Derek had no idea who he was really playing against. 3 days after my birthday dinner, I received an email confirmation for a tour of River Pines retirement community. Derek had scheduled it without my consent, selecting an 11 a.m. slot for the following Tuesday. The presumption infuriated me, but I decided to use their underestimation to my advantage. On Monday evening, I walked to the main house with a determined stride. It was time to confront Derek directly about what I had overheard away from dinner parties and without Amanda present. I had recorded our previous conversation using my phone, something Derek hadn't anticipated from a supposedly technologically challenged older woman. I found him in his study again, surrounded by blueprints and financial documents that he hurriedly shuffled when I entered. "Kitty, we've discussed this. You need to call before coming over." Derek's tone was clipped, irritated at the interruption. I placed my phone on his desk, the recording app already open. "I want to discuss what I overheard about your Highland project, Derek. I've spoken with a friend who works for the Securities and Exchange Commission. He's very interested in your funding methods." This was a bluff, but Derek didn't know that. His face flushed with anger as he stood coming around the desk to tower over me. "You're playing a dangerous game, old woman. Do you have any idea what allegations like that could do?" I stood my ground, looking up at him steadily. "I know exactly what they could do. That's why I've made copies of what I found and stored them securely." His eyes darted to my phone. "What exactly do you want, money? Is that it?" "I want you to stop manipulating my daughter. I want you to cancel that River Pines appointment and honor our original agreement about the guest house." Derek laughed, a cold sound without humor. "You really don't understand your position here, do you? Amanda believes you're mentally declining. One call to the right doctor and I could have you declared incompetent." My hand trembled slightly as I reached for my phone, but Derek was faster. He snatched it up, holding it away from me. "Give that back," I demanded, reaching for it. "What's on here, Kitty? Evidence of your delusions." Derek's voice was mocking as he held the phone higher. "Or maybe proof that you're more lucid than we've been telling everyone." I lunged for the phone, my patience gone. Derek grabbed my arm with his free hand, his fingers digging in hard enough to leave bruises. "Let go of me," I shouted, hoping Amanda might come to my defense. Derek's face transformed a mask of rage, replacing his usual controlled expression. "You think you can threaten me in my own house? You're nothing but a burden Amanda's been too guilty to shake off." He started backing me toward the walk-in closet adjoining his study, still gripping my arm. I struggled against his hold, but at 67 I was no match for a man nearly half my age. "If you're so concerned about being heard, maybe you need some quiet time to reconsider your position," Derek said, his voice eerily calm despite the violence of his actions. With a final shove, he pushed me into the closet. I stumbled back among hanging coats and stored files, catching myself against the back wall. Before I could recover, the door slammed shut, followed by the distinctive click of a lock engaging. "Derek, let me out immediately." I pounded on the door, my heart racing with a combination of fear and outrage. His voice came through the solid wood, muffled but clear enough. "You can come out when you're ready to be reasonable. When you agree to River Pines and to keeping your delusional accusations to yourself." Then his footsteps receded, leaving me in complete darkness. The closet was large enough that I wasn't physically cramped, but the darkness was absolute. No light seeped under the door or through any crack. I fumbled around feeling for a light switch but found none. My hands trembled as I explored my prison, finding shelves of storage boxes on one side and hanging garment bags on the other. I'm not sure how long I stood there in shock before I heard footsteps approaching again. Hope surged as I called out, "Is someone there? Please, I'm locked in." Mom Amanda's voice, uncertain and confused, came through the door. "What are you doing in there?" Relief flooded me. "Amanda, thank God. Your husband locked me in here. Please open the door." A pause. Why would Derek do that? The doubt in her voice pierced me like a physical pain. "Because I confronted him about his fraud, Amanda. Please just open the door." Another pause, longer this time. I heard murmuring, realizing Derek had joined her. "Mom, Derek says you came in ranting about conspiracies and locked yourself in to create drama. He says the door doesn't even lock from the outside." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Amanda, that's not true. He took my phone and pushed me in here. Check the door, there's a key lock." More murmuring. Then Amanda again, her voice now tinged with the patient tone one might use with a child. "We're going to give you some time to calm down, Mom. When you're ready to come out and discuss River Pines rationally, just knock." "Amanda, please," I called out, my voice breaking. "I'm your mother." But their footsteps were already retreating, leaving me alone in the darkness once more. The betrayal was so complete it left me breathless. My own daughter, choosing to believe I would lock myself in a closet rather than accepting her husband, could be capable of such an act. The reality of my situation crashed down on me as I sank to the floor, my back against the door. I'm not sure how long I sat there, cycling through disbelief, anger, and heartbreak. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours in the disorienting darkness. My mind raced, considering and discarding options for escape. Then my hand brushed against something in the pocket of a coat hanging nearby. Investigating by touch, I discovered it was a small flashlight on a keychain. Clicking it on provided a small circle of light that helped ease my rising panic. By the weak beam, I explored the closet more thoroughly. It was primarily used for storage, with boxes of financial records and office supplies lining the shelves. In one corner, I found an old landline telephone extension, likely forgotten when the study was remodeled. With trembling fingers, I lifted the receiver, nearly crying with relief when I heard a dial tone. My first instinct was to call 911, but I hesitated. Derek would simply tell the police I was having a mental episode, and Amanda would back him up. Given the groundwork he'd laid about my supposed cognitive decline, I'd likely end up in a psychiatric hold, which would only strengthen their case for River Pines. Instead, I dialed a number I knew by heart, praying he would answer. "Martin, it's Kitty Williams," I whispered when my lawyer's familiar voice came on the line. "I need help. I'm locked in a closet at my daughter's house." To his credit, Martin didn't question the bizarre statement. "Where exactly are you, and who put you there?" I explained the situation quickly, including Derek's financial fraud and the threats about River Pines. "I've been gathering evidence, but Derek took my phone." "And Amanda?" Martin interrupted gently. "Let's focus on getting you out safely first. Then we'll deal with everything else. I'm going to call your security team and send them to the house." The security team had been my most recent precaution, hired initially to monitor the property and protect my investment in the mortgage. I'd never imagined they would be rescuing me from imprisonment by my own son-in-law. After hanging up with Martin, I settled in to wait, using the time to process what had happened and what needed to happen next. Sitting in that dark closet, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The last illusions about my relationship with Amanda had been stripped away. The last doubts about what Derek was capable of had been resolved. As I sat trapped in darkness, my resolve hardened. This mansion, which Derek had used to imprison and intimidate me, would become the instrument of my liberation. By the time security arrived to free me, I had already decided all the locks would be changed, and Derek would find himself on the outside looking in. The closet that was meant to break me instead became the crucible in which my new strength was forged. In darkness, I found clarity. In confinement, I found determination. This would be the last time anyone underestimated Kitty Williams. When I finally heard the commotion outside the closet door, I'd been imprisoned for nearly 5 hours. My legs were cramped, my mouth dry, but my mind was clearer than it had been in months. "Amanda, is that you?" I called out, keeping my voice deliberately weak and frightened. Instead of my daughter, I heard an unfamiliar male voice. "Mrs. Williams, this is Thomas from Sentinel Security. We're here to get you out. Please stand back from the door." The lock clicked and light flooded in, temporarily blinding me after hours in darkness. 2 men in security uniforms helped me to my feet, supporting me as I stumbled from the closet. "Are you injured, ma'am? Do you need medical attention?" the taller one asked, genuine concern in his voice. I shook my head, blinking as my eyes adjusted. "Where are my daughter and son-in-law?" "We've been instructed not to engage with them, Mrs. Williams. Your lawyer is waiting for you at the guest house." I allowed them to escort me across the property, aware of Amanda watching from an upstairs window, her face pale and confused. I didn't acknowledge her. The time for maternal protection had passed. Now I needed to protect myself. Martin was waiting as promised, along with a woman he introduced as Dr. Faye Levinson, a geriatric psychiatrist. For the next hour, Dr. Levinson conducted a thorough cognitive assessment while Martin took photographs of the bruises forming on my arm where Derek had grabbed me. The psychiatrist's conclusion was unequivocal. I showed no signs of cognitive impairment or dementia. Her report would be notarized and filed immediately. Once we were alone, Martin spread documents across my kitchen table. "I've expedited everything as you requested, Kitty. The shell company's ownership of the mortgage has been confirmed. As the property owner, you have every right to secure it as you see fit." I signed where indicated, my signature steady, despite everything. "What about the restraining order?" "Filed with the police an hour ago. Derek can't come within 100 feet of you without violating it." Martin hesitated. "Are you sure about all this, Kitty? Amanda is still your daughter." I looked out the window toward the main house where I had been imprisoned and abandoned by the 2 people who should have protected me. "Yes, I'm sure. Sometimes love means setting boundaries, even painful ones." The next 24 hours were a whirlwind of activity, all conducted while Derek and Amanda were attending a charity gala in the city. They had left without checking on me, apparently assuming I was still licking my wounds after the closet incident. A team of locksmiths arrived first, changing every external lock on the main house and reprogramming the security system. Next came IT specialists who installed cameras throughout the property, ensuring I could monitor all approaches to the house. My belongings were moved from the guest house to the master suite of the main house, a symbolic reclaiming of space. My lawyer contacted Derek's investors with evidence of his financial misdeeds, careful to present it as a concerned third party rather than a vengeful mother-in-law. The Securities and Exchange Commission opened a preliminary investigation based on the documents I had gathered. Throughout it all, a dull ache persisted in my chest. This wasn't how a mother should have to protect herself. This wasn't what I had envisioned when I welcomed Derek into our family, when I sacrificed to help them purchase this home, when I dreamed of being a grandmother to Amanda's child. Late that night, alone in the massive master bedroom that had never been mine until now, I pulled out old photo albums I had kept hidden in the guest house. Pictures of Amanda as a little girl, gap-toothed and beaming. As a teenager, serious and determined. As a medical student, exhausted but proud in her white coat. The progression of images told the story of a confident, kind young woman who had somehow lost herself in Derek's orbit. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was I doing the right thing? Would this decisive action drive Amanda further away? I traced her face in a photo from her medical school graduation, remembering how we had hugged tightly, both of us crying with joy and pride. But then I glanced down at the bruises on my arm, still darkening against my pale skin. I remembered the absolute darkness of the closet. The betrayal of hearing Amanda walk away, choosing to believe Derek's lies rather than her own mother's pleas. I thought of the systematic way Derek had isolated and gaslit me, and how thoroughly he had turned my daughter against me. No, this wasn't just about me protecting myself. It was about showing Amanda what real strength looked like. It was about creating a safe harbor for her to return to when she finally saw Derek for who he truly was. And most importantly, it was about ensuring my future grandchild would have at least one home free from manipulation and control. I closed the photo album and placed it on the nightstand. Tomorrow would bring confrontation and pain, but also perhaps the first steps toward healing for all of us. As dawn broke, I received confirmation that Derek and Amanda were returning from the gala. I positioned myself in Derek's study, now cleared of his papers and rearranged to my taste. From the security monitors I watched, their car approached the gate, saw Derek punch in the code that no longer worked. His confusion as he tried repeatedly growing, visibly frustrated. Amanda's concerned expression as she placed a hand on his arm. Finally, Derek got out of the car and approached the intercom. His voice came through the speaker system, initially controlled but with an undercurrent of anger. "There seems to be a problem with the gate. Can someone let us in?" I pressed the intercom button. "Hello, Derek. I'm afraid the access codes have been changed." "Kitty, what the hell is going on? Let us in immediately." "I'm afraid I can't do that, Derek. The property is under new management." "This isn't funny, Kitty. Open the gate or I'll call the police." I smiled, though he couldn't see me. "Feel free to call them. I've already spoken with them this morning. They have copies of the restraining order against you, as well as documentation of my ownership of this property." There was a long silence, then Amanda's voice tentative and confused. "Mom, what is this about? What restraining order?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself against the pain in her voice. "Amanda, I've reclaimed what's mine. This house and property are owned by Willow Creek Investments, which I established 20 years ago after your father died. I purchased the mortgage 6 months ago when I discovered Derek's financial troubles." Derek's voice cut in savage with rage. "You crazy old bat. You can't do this." "I already have, Derek. As for being crazy, Dr. Levinson's assessment yesterday confirmed I'm completely competent. Unlike you, however, I have evidence of financial fraud that the SEC is now investigating. And unlike you, I have documented proof of assault and false imprisonment from our closet incident." I watched on the monitor as Derek's face contorted with fury. He slammed his hand against the gate, causing Amanda to flinch away from him, a reaction that told its own story about their private dynamics. "Mom, please," Amanda pleaded. "I'm pregnant. Where are we supposed to go?" The question pierced my heart, but I held firm. "You have options, Amanda. You can stay in the guest house while you decide what to do about your marriage. Derek, however, is not welcome on this property. The security team has been instructed to enforce the restraining order. You'll regret this." Derek threatened, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." "I think I know exactly who I'm dealing with now, Derek. That's why all the locks have been changed." I ended the conversation there, watching as Derek kicked the gate in frustration, then stalked back to the car. Amanda followed more slowly, looking back at the house, with an expression I couldn't quite read from the camera angle. As they drove away, I felt no triumph, no vindication, only a weary relief that the first step had been taken. The road ahead would be difficult, fraught with legal battles and emotional confrontations, but for the first time in years, I was the one in control of my own life. And perhaps, just perhaps, this would be the wake-up call Amanda needed to reclaim control of hers. Derek and Amanda returned that evening, this time with a police officer in tow. I watched their approach on the security monitors, noting how Derek strutted confidently beside the officer, while Amanda hung back, one hand protectively over her belly. They were in for a surprise. When they rang the intercom, I answered calmly, then buzzed open the gate to allow the police car through while keeping the main house locked. From the front porch, I greeted them with Martin standing supportively at my side. "Good evening, officer," I said pleasantly. "How can I help you?" The young policeman looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, I have a complaint about a property dispute and possible elder financial abuse." Derek jumped in before I could respond. "This woman is my mother-in-law. She's suffering from dementia and has somehow changed the locks on our home. Martin stepped forward, introducing himself as my attorney. Officer, we have documentation proving Mrs. Williams' ownership of this property through her company, Willow Creek Investments. We also have a valid restraining order against Mr. Thompson following an assault yesterday. He handed over a folder of documents which the officer reviewed with increasing discomfort. Meanwhile, Derek's face had turned an alarming shade of red. This is ridiculous, he exploded. She sold her house to help us buy this place. Correction, I interjected calmly. I sold my house and contributed to the down payment, but Willow Creek Investments purchased the mortgage from Landmark Financial 6 months ago, when it became clear your business was failing and you might default. Amanda gasped, looking at her husband. What is she talking about, Derek? Is the business in trouble? Derek's expression flickered momentary panic before he recovered. Of course not. Your mother is confused as usual. The officer cleared his throat, clearly wanting to be anywhere but in the middle of this family drama. Mr. Thompson, these ownership documents appear to be in order, and there is a valid restraining order requiring you to stay at least 100 feet from Mrs. Williams. Derek's confident facade cracked. This is my house. You can't just take someone's home because of some paperwork tricks. I stepped closer to the officer, rolling up my sleeve to reveal the bruises on my arm. These aren't paperwork tricks, officer. These are from when my son-in-law locked me in a closet for 5 hours yesterday, after I confronted him about his financial fraud. The officer's expression hardened as he examined the bruises. Martin added, We have a psychiatric evaluation confirming Mrs. Williams is of sound mind, contradicting Mr. Thompson's claims about dementia. Amanda had gone pale, her eyes fixed on the bruises on my arm. Mom, did Derek really do that to you? Before I could answer, Derek grabbed her arm. Don't listen to her, Amanda. Your mother has been manipulating you your entire life. This is just another one of her tricks. I noticed Amanda wince at his grip, saw how automatically she tried to make herself smaller beside him. It confirmed every fear I'd had about their relationship. Amanda, I said gently, you're welcome to stay in the guest house until you figure things out, but Derek needs to leave the property now. Derek's control finally snapped. You think you've won, you interfering witch. I built this life. I control everything. He lunged toward me, only to be intercepted by the police officer. Sir, back away now, or I'll have to detain you. For a moment I thought Derek might actually strike the officer. Instead, he turned his rage on Amanda. This is your fault. If you had put her in that home like I wanted, none of this would have happened. The naked truth of his words hung in the air. Amanda's hand went to her mouth, her eyes widening as she looked at her husband with new awareness. The officer stepped between them. Mr. Thompson, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the property in compliance with this restraining order. This isn't over, Derek snarled, pointing at me. I'll fight this. I'll take everything. Actually, I replied calmly, I've already provided evidence of your financial improprieties to the Securities and Exchange Commission. Your investors have also been notified. I suspect fighting me is going to be the least of your concerns very soon. The color drained from Derek's face. Amanda, he said, his tone suddenly conciliatory. Tell your mother this is all a misunderstanding. Tell her I would never hurt you. Amanda looked from Derek to me, then down at her own arm where his finger marks were visible. I saw 20 years of maternal instinct war with 6 years of manipulation in her eyes. I need time to think, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. I think you should go, Derek. It was the first independent decision I'd seen her make in years. Pride surged through me, tempered with sadness that it had come to this. The officer escorted Derek to his car, watching as he drove away with a squeal of tires against asphalt. Only when the taillights disappeared did Amanda turn to me, tears streaming down her face. Is it true? About the business? About the closet? I held out my arms, and after a moment's hesitation, she stepped into them, her pregnant belly pressing against me, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Yes, sweetheart, it's all true. But you're safe now. Both of you, I added gently, touching her belly. Over her shoulder, I nodded to Martin, who discreetly stepped inside to give us privacy. On the porch of the home that was now truly mine, I held my daughter as the last light faded from the sky and the automatic security lights clicked on around the property. There would be difficult conversations ahead, legal battles, the painful process of Amanda recognizing and recovering from Derek's manipulation. But for now it was enough that she was here, that she had chosen truth over comfortable lies, that she had taken the first step back to herself. As we stood there in the gathering darkness, I felt the baby kick against my side, a reminder of the future we were fighting for, a future where my grandchild would grow up knowing their worth, their voice, their power to choose. A future I had secured by refusing to be locked away, literally or figuratively, by a man who thought my age made me disposable. Sometimes the greatest act of love is standing firm when it would be easier to give in. Sometimes the most important lesson we can teach our children is how to reclaim their power, even if it means we have to reclaim our own first. The weeks following Derek's departure were anything but peaceful. As predicted, he hired aggressive attorneys to contest my ownership of the property, claiming elder financial abuse by my lawyer and financial advisors. The irony might have been amusing if it hadn't been so exhausting. Amanda moved into the guest house, as offered, initially maintaining a fragile, formal relationship with me. She would come to the main house for dinner occasionally, our conversations careful and constrained, tiptoeing around the elephant in the room. Her pregnancy advanced, her belly growing as summer turned to fall, but the shadows under her eyes spoke of sleepless nights and private tears. I gave her space, understanding that her world had been upended. Not only was her marriage crumbling, but she was also reconciling with the knowledge that her mother wasn't the dependent, declining figure Derek had portrayed, but rather a financially independent woman who had concealed her resources for decades. "When you hid all this from me," she said one evening, as we sat on the patio, watching fireflies emerge, "why didn't you trust me?" The question had been coming for months, and I had prepared my answer, but delivering it was still difficult. "It wasn't about trust at first, Amanda. After your father died, I wanted you to build your own life, not feel entitled to an inheritance. I wanted you to become the strong, independent woman you were before Derek." She flinched at his name but didn't interrupt. "Later, when Derek came into the picture, I kept my financial situation private because I wanted to be sure he loved you for yourself, not for potential wealth. But he secured the money anyway. I've never felt so foolish." "And it was my fault," Amanda whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I pushed you to sell your house. I believed him when he said you were declining. I left you in that closet." I reached across the space between our chairs, taking her hand. "We both made mistakes, sweetheart. But what matters now is what we do next." 2 weeks after that conversation, federal agents arrested Derek at his apartment in the city. The Securities and Exchange Commission investigation, bolstered by the evidence I had provided, uncovered extensive fraud across multiple development projects. His investors filed additional lawsuits, and his business collapsed virtually overnight. Amanda filed for divorce the same week, her hands steady as she signed the papers Martin had prepared. She was 6 months pregnant by then, and the prospect of raising a child alone terrified her, but not as much as the alternative of raising a child with Derek. "I never stopped loving you, Mom," she told me after filing the divorce papers. "Even when I thought you were losing your mind, even when I was horrible to you, I just couldn't see clearly. It was like being underwater for years, everything distorted and distant." I moved back to the main house shortly after that, not as my mother's caretaker, but as her daughter, as her friend. Maybe we could try again, starting over with honesty this time. The first time Derek violated the restraining order, showing up drunk at the gate, screaming accusations and threats, Amanda witnessed his rage unfiltered. She saw what I had seen in him years earlier, the uncontrolled fury that had always lurked beneath his polished exterior. After the police took him away, she sat in my kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug of tea, and finally told me about the years of subtle control, of criticism, disguised as concern, of isolation from friends who might have shown her the placism. "Truth. I thought it was love," she admitted, voice hollow with realization. "I thought being consumed by someone was the same as being loved by them." In my living room, we started a ritual of sorts. Each evening, Amanda would share one instance of Derek's manipulation, and I would counter it with one memory of her strength before she met him. Slowly, like water wearing away stone, we rebuilt her sense of self, her trust in her own perceptions. On a crisp October morning, Amanda went into labor 6 weeks early. The delivery was difficult, but when they placed her tiny daughter in her arms, something shifted in Amanda's face, a steel I recognized from the young woman she had been before Derek. She looked up at me exhausted but determined. Her name is Sophia. Sophia Willow Williams. No trace of Thompson in her name or her future. I cried then, not just for the beautiful granddaughter I never thought I'd have the privilege to know, but for the daughter I had found again. Recovery wasn't linear for any of us. Amanda had days when Derek's voice still echoed in her head, making her doubt her capabilities as a mother, as a doctor, as a woman. I had moments of crushing guilt for not having acted sooner, for not having prevented the pain Derek caused. But we had Sophia, 5 pounds of determination, who grew stronger each day just as we did. By the time she was 3 months old, Amanda had decided to return to cardiology part-time, her confidence gradually rebuilding. Derek eventually pled guilty to multiple counts of securities fraud. The 8-year sentence provided a measure of safety and time for Amanda to truly heal. The divorce finalized with Derek, retaining nothing of the life they had built together, his assets frozen or seized by the government and angry investors. Today, as I watch Amanda playing with 15-month-old Sophia in the garden that once I was forbidden to tend, I reflect on all we've learned. I learned that age doesn't diminish your right to dignity or respect. That sometimes the strongest thing a mother can do is set boundaries even when it breaks her heart. That financial independence isn't just about comfort, but about freedom. Amanda learned that love doesn't diminish you, it expands you. That a partner who truly loves you wants you to shine, not fade. That she is stronger than she ever imagined, capable of rebuilding a life worthy of the extraordinary woman she has always been. And together we learned that healing comes in unexpected ways. That forgiveness is a gift you give yourself. That the darkest closet can't extinguish the light within you if you refuse to let it. As Sophia toddles toward me, arms outstretched and face alight with joy, I think about legacy. Not the financial kind, though Sophia's future is secure in that regard. But the legacy of strength, of boundaries, of self-worth that I hope she inherits from both her mother and grandmother. The mansion that was meant to be my prison has become our sanctuary. The wealth I kept secret has become a foundation for new beginnings. And the closet that was meant to break me became the catalyst for reclaiming not just my own power, but my daughter's as well. If there's one thing I've learned in my 70 years on this earth, it's that you're never too old to stand up for yourself, never too broken to begin again, and never too lost to find your way back to who you truly are. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with someone you love? Share your story in the comments below. If this journey of reclaiming power resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and renewal. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to accept anything less than the respect you deserve.